But before we get rolling on that, I'd like to just mention a couple things to keep in your prayers, and that's one, the people of Helene and who were, that hurricane, as well as those who suffered through Hurricane Milton. Both were pretty catastrophic events, and our resources are stretched very thin because of two back-to-back massive hurricanes. So as we look at prophecy, first and foremost, Israel is at the center of biblical prophecy. If we look at the prophetic clock and we envision prophecy as a clock, if you look at Israel, Israel would be the hour hands. And then you would take Jerusalem, and Jerusalem would be the minute hands, with the Temple Mount and the temple being the the second hands. And as we see things being fulfilled, we need to remember that the prophetic time clock basically got restarted in May of 1948 when Israel became a nation again. And so from that perspective, what we're looking at are events that will be coming. We've been looking at Abraham, and we've been seeing Abraham try to take things into his own hands to create an heir and do that. And it's no different for us. We're beginning to see things, and God's promised these things, and there's this level of expectation in our hearts. And yet we're seeing this time lapse because God is a God of long suffering, and God's purpose is to glorify himself. On the 28th of last month, in September, the foreign ministers of Iran, Russia, and Turkey all met at the UN to discuss Israel. So if you have Iran, which is Persia, Turkey, and Russia all together, that's essentially the main core of the Gog-Magog alliance that will be needed for Ezekiel 38 and 39. We've now seen, since the last one, we've seen Israel go into Lebanon to begin to dismantle Hezbollah. And we need to remember something, because people will say, well, Israel is being an aggressor in this situation. They were incredibly patient. There were over 8,000 rockets that were launched into Israel from Lebanon between October the 7th and when they decided to start their invasion. There have been 2 attacks from Iran, the last one being approximately 181 ballistic missiles that were launched from Iran on the 1st of October. In April, there were 300 plus missiles and drones that were launched from Iran. Now, in April, Israel's response was incredibly limited when they responded back to Iran for that attack. They basically took out some surface-to-air missile defense systems and said, hey, look, we can come in here. You guys can't touch us. This time they have yet to do anything, even though the payload from the October attack, as far as pounds of explosives and the potential for damage, was considerably larger than the April attack. I've been actually amazed at how much restraint Israel has shown as they've been at war with Islamic terrorism in the Middle East. They've used incredibly precise attacks, and they've given prior warning whenever possible to the residents to evacuate an area. So if they know, for example, there's a stockpile of bombs and missiles, they give enough warning for the people to get away before they come in and destroy that stockpile. If they're having to go after a human target, they can't give that much warning because the target will no longer be there. Last week on the 5th of October, there was a 4.5 magnitude earthquake near Tehran. Remember that there's going to be earthquakes and stuff as we enter the last days. But we've had earthquakes throughout history. One of the interesting things is Lloyd Austin, who is the United States Secretary of Defense, met with the Israeli Secretary of Defense Gallant on 9/29, right after we began our attack, Israel began their attack into Lebanon. That's the one where they eliminated the head of Hezbollah and took him out, Nasrallah. On 9/29, Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking at the UN. He had given previous authority to launch the attack before he got up on stage. very shortly after his speech, Nasrallah ceased to exist. However, Lloyd Austin was angry with Israel because they had not informed him ahead of time. Now, we don't ask permission from anybody when we have to deal with something. Nor do we have somebody launching missiles into our own country, trying to kill our own citizens right now. So I think we're using a two-sided standard. Now, granted, the United States is providing the vast majority of the weapons and munitions being used by Israel in this battle, but we're doing that at the same time we send $178 million worth of aid to Lebanon. So we're playing two sides of the same game. And it's important that you guys realize what's going on. America is neither standing with Israel, nor are we anymore, or are we completely against Israel. We're trying to play this middle ground. And I don't think it's based on the Abrahamic covenant that can't play out well. Biden and Netanyahu had a phone conversation on 10/9, and Biden informed Netanyahu that there were to be no nuclear attacks against their nuclear facilities or against their oil and gas facilities. So we, as a nation, have essentially handicapped Israel's ability to persecute a war that they need to do to be able to ensure their survival. These are God's chosen people. They are in their land that was given to Abraham. We're going through all that right now. This is their land given to them by God. And they have a right and they have a responsibility to defend their citizens. And Iran has stated they want to destroy Israel. The vast majority of the Muslims that have a terrorist bent, which is a large percentage of the population, they interview Palestinians, 90% of them want to re-elect Hamas. So it's not like this is not a ingrained, deep, entrenched thing. Through the UN dollars, we've created UNRWA, which provides schools and stuff in Palestine, and they have been teaching the kids how to be terrorists with our dollars in these UN-provided schools. And this is all, none of this is not documented. It's just important to actually realize where the money's going and what's actually going on. So we need to continue to be praying for Israel. We need to be able to present a biblical worldview to people when they say, why are we supporting Israel? This doesn't make sense that we're sending money there. And a lot of conservatives say we shouldn't be sending money to Israel and we shouldn't be sending money to Ukraine. And there's going to be abuses in both cases, and I don't necessarily have a biblical opinion on Ukraine. It might be smart for us to keep Russia tied up there and let Ukraine fight Russia than us. But when it comes to Israel, we have a ethical, moral, and religious imperative to support Israel. Now, what do we know? When is the rapture going to occur? None of us know, right? It's not for us to know. Even Jesus doesn't know when that's going to occur. But what we can do is we can say these symptoms are occurring. We see these signs. These are real. We're seeing the beginning of the Gog-Magog coalition. We're seeing all the nations turn against Israel. We're seeing Israel become a thorn in the side of the nations. And it has to do that for there to be some kind of a one-world conglomerate that can come together and say, we're going to reestablish peace. Some other interesting things that are going on. And a lot of these, I've seen them and they've been out there and they're floating around, and you've got all these pieces kind of floating around that all tie into the end times. And they're all pretty much ready to go. And one of them is the central bank digital currency, what's otherwise known as the digital dollar. Now, the technology is an amazing technology. It's all blockchain technology, and if it were used for good, it's incredibly a great technology. If you want to pay somebody, you can pay them, and nobody can steal your money out of your wallet. Nobody. You can completely cut off a criminal enterprise because you can keep them from being able to get money for their goods. And the way that essentially works is if I want to sell something to you, April, you have to then give me, through the transaction, you'll be giving me your blockchain technology, which will go to the central government in exchange. Say I wanted to buy your cup there that you have. And I say, all right, I'm going to buy your cup for $10 in the banks. And the government or central bank says, great. And then the money goes into your account and it's credited to you. Now, what's different from what we have now with the current bank accounts and the regular digital system that we have now is you say, I'm going to sell you the cup. And so you run my credit card. Your bank then sends a transaction to my credit card or to my bank. That money comes out of my account, goes to the bank, from one bank to the other bank, and back to the customer. The government is not involved in that transaction. This puts the government, the central bank, in the middle of every single transaction. So effectively what can happen is every single thing that's bought and sold has a distinct code. And I'm not massively gifted in this, but the central bank would know that I'm buying a coffee cup, or they would know that I'm buying bread, or they would know that I'm buying a Bible, or they would know that you're buying a car. They know exactly everything that you buy. So they can then pick and choose what you're allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have. China has completely put this into place, and they've tied it to all the facial recognition cameras that they have across the world. Now, cameras are cool. They use something called IP, Internet Protocol. And if there's no firewall in there, most cameras are no longer closed caption. They are run on the internet. So if you know the IP address of a camera, you can view somebody else's camera from anywhere unless they've got some stuff in there to block it. So what they do is, in order to run all the security cameras and things that China has access to every single camera. They run their artificial intelligence software in the background so that they can identify potential criminals or people that are doing things. And China has this massive, as a country, control over their people and their ability to understand what their people are doing. One of the other things in China is you don't have a phone with you. That is a crime. So if you do not have your smartphone with you, now why would they want you to have a smartphone? Well, it had all of the medical protocol stuff from when we had the COVID vaccine stuff. It also has your bank account information, all that. It also has this great thing called GPS on it. And they know exactly where somebody is. So when people meet and the church has had to go basically back underground in China. For a while there was a period of time where China allowed the churches to be revitalized, but they've gone back to putting in place, if the church does not agree with the Communist Party, with the Chinese Communist Party, they can no longer function as a church. So if you're preaching an accurate biblical worldview, you're no longer going to be sanctioned by the Communist Chinese Party. So the church has been forced underground, but they have this massive overarching thing. Now what they also have is something called your social credit score. So if I'm a good guy and I go right along with everything the Communist Chinese Party wants, and I always have my phone with me, and I don't meet with any people that are bad. I only meet with other people that are good people, according to the Communist Chinese Party. And then I have a good social credit score, and I'm given additional freedoms that other people aren't. I can go to better restaurants, I can travel more, I can accumulate property and things of that nature. Now recently, China's getting scared. They've asked for all the passports back from all their teachers, and all government workers are expected to turn in their passports. And then you apply to get your passport back if you need to travel. They're trying to limit information. Now, a system like this, combined especially with what's going on with quantum computing, and quantum computing is like this exponential leap in the ability to process and store information, combined with artificial intelligence, allows the system to know everything where everybody's at all the time if you have those few factors in there, for the most part. Now in America, we still have some protections. You don't have to have your cell phone. I don't know if the government has access to every IP camera in the United States or not. That information I don't know. What I do know, though, is that kind of system would allow somebody to control who can buy, sell, and trade. When you have a digital dollar, you can also limit the length that the dollar is able to be in circulation, or the central bank digital currency. So if you want to stimulate an economy and you send out some kind of stimulus checks, they have a lifespan, and if the money is not spent within a certain period of time, the money ceases to exist. And China's done that on a limited scale with some stuff after COVID, which prohibits a person from being able to obtain any form of financial freedom and not be dependent on the government. What do we see going on with censorship? The owner of Telegram was imprisoned by France recently because they can't break into his stuff right now, and because also some criminal enterprises are using Telegram to communicate. I mean, it is a secure platform. Christians are also using Telegram to communicate because it's a secure platform, and it's hard, at least right now, for them to censor it. Elon Musk was sued and was forced to take down Starlink in Brazil for a while because people were getting information and they wanted him to pay this big fee. So when you hear the word misinformation, you also need to remember that something does not fit the narrative. So when we're seeing this constant word of this is misinformation, or this is, if you can't control the narrative, you can't control the people. And if you can control the narrative, and you can control the currency, and this whole thing comes down to being controlled and people being able to have control over other people, to exert absolute, complete, total control in another human's life. And while I don't have that desire, if you look at the vast majority of world leaders throughout history, that's what they wanted. They want to control other people and exert control. And that is a satanic thing, to have that level of control. In the United States, we've seen mass illegal immigration. And the primary thing for that is it's twofold. Mass immigration has occurred about the last 30 years, specifically in Western Europe. And the role there, whenever you have mass immigration into a country, you begin to destabilize that country. And you break up the unity of the people in that country and the identity of the people in that country and their national identity. You also bring people in that vote, if it still has a democratic process, in the way you want them to vote. There's no reason to have mass immigration, and it's never, ever occurred throughout history, into a communist or Marxist country. Nobody immigrates, with rare exception. You don't see lots of people going, hey, I'm going to immigrate to Chile. They have such a great economy going on right now. Anytime Marxism is a control system, and it uses the lure, the satanic lure, and Satan always throws something out there of, look at how beautiful and neat this is. And whether it's sex, whether it's this concept of being equitable, whether it's a concept of whatever, or something that's free. We're all going to share, we're all going to get along, and we're all going to work together in this cohesive unit. But what you wind up with is a bunch of broke people supporting a few rich people. That's what happens in communism every single time it's ever been implemented. Mass illegal immigration also destroys the voting system, and it creates a sense of lawlessness because you've allowed people illegally to enter a country, and then you don't uphold the laws of that country that would then fine and or deport the person back to the country where they were originally from. So you create a sense of lawlessness. The UN Pact for the Future was recently voted on. We're giving additional powers to the United Nations. The World Health Organization, which is essentially tied directly to the UN, tried to create a pandemic pact, which would have allowed the World Health Organization to come in by force if necessary and implement whatever they need in a country. If they call that there's a pandemic in that nation, it would have given them the power to use the military troops of the UN to enforce that. Now there's a man named Klaus Schwab. He is the head of the World Economic Forum. He also helped get something called the Club of Rome going. Now the Club of Rome is loosely associated with the World Economic Forum, but it is the concept also of having a one world. How do we, the UN, the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, they're different kind of organizations, but they all have a massive commonality in that the same key players are involved in all of them. And the goal of all of them is how do we govern, control, supervise the world so that it fits our goals and our ideals. And the Club of Rome is one of them. Now they created this interesting map that has the 10 regions in the world that would have governments. And if you know, there are 10 kings, right? The NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, aligned exactly with the Club of Rome, which was to bring Canada, the United States, and Mexico together into some kind of cohesive economic union, the same way they did with the European Union in Western Europe. Now, as we're seeing this, we're seeing a lot of pushback at the same time. France has an illegitimate president right now, Macron. He lost the election, forced a special election, and tied together with some so he could stay in power. The same thing basically happened in Spain. Some people would say that the same thing happened in the United States of America 3.5 years ago, that we had a failed election. So we're seeing all these signs. We're seeing war. The vast majority of the world is at war now. All these things are starting to be talked about. We're seeing massive storms like Helene and Milton. And something that's interesting about those is there has been, this is supposition, this is not Bible, but somebody has tied whenever the United States has gone against Israel or encouraged a two-state solution, that we have had natural disasters in our own country. And right now we are not supporting Israel well. This week we've had something beautiful. We've been able to see the northern lights clear down here in Texas. You know, I saw them one other time when there was a massive storm, and that was clear up in northern Colorado. There's going to be signs in the heavens, right? We're seeing things beginning to happen. We're seeing the stage set, for lack of a better term. Now, what does that mean for the church? It means that we need to be ready. Luke chapter 19 verse 13 tells us, so he called his 10 servants, delivered to them 10 minas, and said to them, do business till I come. Other people, that scripture in the King James is, occupy until I come. So we're to be about living our world. We're to be about doing the things. The minas refer to the talents that God gives us in relationship to the work of the kingdom. We're to be about kingdom work until the Lord returns. We're to be about doing his job. And we all have work to do. If it comes to making financial decisions, make wise financial decisions like we're going to be here for 200 years. Our kids are and our great-grandchildren, right? Don't be dumb. That's not what it means. It's like the person that goes, well, there's a commonality. A lot of kids who've gone to war, my dad talked to me about it. They'd go out and they'd go buy a brand new Corvette before they went to Vietnam. And then they got back and they got this car they couldn't afford. So, care for your family, your community, your neighbors, and participate in life. We have civic responsibilities. We have an election coming up. This election is going to be, it is a choice between two non-godly people. Well, we're going to put it that way. But we have one platform that supports a far more ungodly agenda, in my opinion, than the other, that has chosen and pursued the murder of millions and millions of American children. That's encouraged and promotes and enables people to mutilate their kids, through transgenderism stuff. Take a vacation if you want to take a vacation. Lead as a believer if you're in business. Do the things that you're supposed to do while we're here. It doesn't mean that we check out. And for me, as I see all this stuff going on, there's a part of me that wants to isolate, to pull back and just to really narrow stuff down. But be intentional also. about how you spend your time, your resources, and those things. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 through 25. Another is says, "Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest," which would be the Holy of Holies, "by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way he consecrated for us through the veil, that is his flesh." So we are consecrated by the flesh of Jesus. "And having a high priest over the house of God," the high priest now is Jesus, "let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith." We need to be sure of whose we are. Not just who we are as a person, but do we actually belong to Jesus? "Having a heart sprinkled from all evil consciousness and our bodies washed with pure water." Now, our evil conscience is removed as we continue to put our faith and trust in God and we listen to the Holy Spirit. We've been baptized in water. "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching." We're to live godly, biblical lives. We're to build each other up in the church. And for me, I can see the day approaching. It's close. Now, will I die of old age? Or will I be raptured? I hope I get raptured, and it would not surprise me one bit if that occurs. Be sure of your faith, because the tribulation period is not a place where there's never a bad time to come to faith. But that last 7 years, 50% of the world's population is going to perish by the middle of the tribulation. 4.5 billion people will cease to exist. Consider one another. That means we think about each other. We think about those in the body where we have an opportunity to serve and to stir up good works. When you can serve somebody and share the gospel with them, do so. And like for me, lots of times that occurs at work. I spend a large percentage of my time working for somebody else, and I have interactions there. When I can and the opportunity presents itself, I talk about Scripture. When people talk about what's going on, I always try to bring stuff back to why is this happening. Trump is not going to save the United States of America. Flat out. A spiritual awakening might. The church, we are here to be equipped so that we can be sent out and be used by God. We're here to exhort each other, to encourage each other when we're having struggles. And the only way that people know when we're having struggles with things is if we actually fellowship. That's one of the reasons why we do a potluck. I enjoy your all's food. It's great. But I also want to encourage you guys to get to know each other, to actually develop real relationships that aren't just surface level. And so that's what we're to be about. We can see the signs, we can see the times, and just like y'all, I'm concerned. Things are not good. Things are getting worse and worse, but they're not falling apart. They're falling into place. We know how this comes out, and we're just sojourners here.